You're listening to Quantum Revolution with Karen Curry Parker, exploring new frontiers in consciousness, science, and evolution. Join us in intimate conversations with cutting-edge scientists, spiritual leaders, artists, disruptors, and visionaries who are working towards reframing the narrative of our future by healing the rift between spirituality and science, reclaiming creativity, and laying the foundation for a new world. And now, here's your host, Karen Curry Parker.
The holistic approach to wellness, education, stress relief, alternative medicine, and more lies in the integration of the mind, body, and spirit. The phrase, mind, body, and spirit, the holy trinity of holistic well-being, from its inception, gives us a dilemma. There's no separation between the mind, body, and spirit. They are one. And yet, the nature of the way the brain works and the materialistic interpretation of life insists that the mind, the body, and the spirit are all separate entities, chugging along independently, hoping to be harnessed in unity somehow as the end result of awakened living. Materialistic thinking wants us to rank mind, body, and spirit in order. Which comes first? Which one is the most important? Which one controls the functioning of the rest? But if we try to answer these questions, we end up sending ourselves down a rabbit hole that mimics the chicken and the egg question, or the challenge set up by the phrase, I am a liar. If the phrase is true, then you're lying. If the phrase is a lie, then you're telling the truth. In their new book, The Quantum Brain, physicist Dr. Amit Goswami and physician Dr. Valentina Onisor explore the mind, body, and spirit dilemma by untangling the myths of our understanding of the brain. By learning how to use the brain as a tool to help us influence the way in which we perceive meaning and purpose in our lives, we tap into our natural ability to align our mind and consequently our bodies and the flow of spirit through our lives in a way that optimizes our potential for well-being and abundance. Join us for this mind-expanding conversation about the true purpose of the brain and how to optimize the function of your mind. Welcome to Quantum Revolution. I'm Karen Curry Parker, and I'm excited today to be talking to Dr. Valentina Onisor and Dr. Amit Goswami, and we're going to be discussing their new book, The Quantum Brain. And this is a book that when I read this book, I really had to read it in little bits and kind of sit and think about it. I want to start today first with exploring with you, Dr. Goswami. We talk a lot about the mind and the body and the mind-body connection. Talk to me a little bit about the mind and the body, and are the mind and the body separate, and how does that play into our understanding of consciousness?
This is the absolutely beginning question to answer. And this question is one of great difficulty because the role of the brain is a bit subtle, mysterious to say the least. Consciousness is one and only. It is a oneness that in principle cannot be broken down into duality. This is why it is called oneness without a second. There is no second to break it down into separate components. Then how do we do this? Because in conscious awareness, the whole idea is that we see ourselves as separate from the object that we are experiencing. And we never see ourselves this way for human beings without our brain. So we know that the brain is crucial in giving us this experience of conscious awareness, an experience of I have an I, a self, that seems to be separate from the environment with objects that I am seeing. This is also a mystery for the brain because if you analyze the brain, there is an object and the object is making an image on the brain's retina. But then the image is further analyzed by apparatus of the rest of the brain, electrical apparatus, and making an electrical image. But this is still an object. An image is also an object, an internal object to be sure. But who is looking at it? This is the problem also from the brain side of things. This is called the paradox of perception. Because who is looking at is qualitatively different from what is being looked at. One is an experiencer and the other one is experienced. One is a subject, I, and the other is a predicate, an object that we can see. It is so subtle and so difficult. How does consciousness create a distinction where there is no distinction? There is no real distinction. All is one. And brain is somehow doing it. So the mystery is solved when we realize that we human beings for a long time has been interested in this.
This is the part to me that I really it was a brain bender when I was reading your book. And so I want to unpack this linearly because I think when we can understand this, it'll help us navigate the process of deconditioning our mind. So am I correct when I hear you say that, based on what you just said and based on what I read in your book, that our minds, if we have a mind and it's not conditioned, so let's say we're born and we live in the pure state of the expression of mind through our brains, that thoughts that we would have would be thoughts of pure consciousness. And of course, consequently, the actions we would take would be a result of a direct connection with consciousness. And that what happens to us in our lives is as we are born, we are immediately conditioned. Our minds and the way in which we think start to be conditioned away from the expression of pure consciousness through our brains. And that part of what we have to do if we're going to be in better alignment with the imperative of consciousness, if you will, is we have to decondition our mind. Is that a good way of summarizing that?
You got it. That's it.
This then, of course, inspires me to think about some other questions. And of course, the first big question is, how do we decondition the brain? At the time when we're doing this interview, it's the beginning of the new calendar year in 2022. Everybody starts off the new year with, I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to exercise, or I'm going to eat better. Most people don't even make it a couple of weeks with intentions. How difficult is it to change the mind and consequently, or to change our thinking and consequently shift our conditioning? And what do we do to shift our mental conditioning?
We condition with other people's conditioning, and we continue to do that. The way that the materialist science have constructed mind is all wrong. It constructs mind as a computer, and the way computers can learn new things is that you replace the old program by a new program. So reprogramming, this is called. So they just use reprogramming, and this is what majority of people try to do, and they think I'm reconditioning my mind. No, we're just putting the old conditioning under less and less use, and you are using the new conditioning more and more. So there is more probability of recall for the new conditioned stuff. But you have not learned to use your mind in an original way. To be free of conditioning, there is only one way. You have to be creative and have to find your own meaning. This is what we call creativity. Creativity is the discovery of new meaning, invention of new meaning. You can take old meanings and juxtapose and so forth until you find a new meaning. That's the lesser creativity. When we really want good creativity, fantastic creativity, outstanding creativity, we look at the archetypes that come to us via intuition. This is why I mentioned intuition in the very get-go, because intuition is fundamental to not only get the quantum brain activated, but also fundamental to get my original mind. Otherwise, I'm just using mind in the way other people use it, with their conditioning, their opinions. And you see what happened. This is why America is losing its edge. People are divided in two tents. One tent uses one set of people's conditioning, another tent uses another set of people's conditioning. And these leaders are just manipulating us. This way or that way. Which way do you want to dance? There are only two ways to dance. This is ridiculous. This is not the way to live. Quantum brain makes us original, but we have to learn how to use it.
I always want to translate what you're saying because it's so brilliant to me. What I hear you saying is that when we cultivate or grow in our intuition, that creating or thinking or feeling through with our intuition gives us the capacity to leap over our conditioning and to reframe the meanings that we have around the core archetypes that make us human. Is that a good way of saying that?
This is a good way of saying it, and this is what we really are very keen to get across to all people, that get to the archetypes, respect your intuition, find new meaning around what you've intuited, and that makes you an original. And then you will never be persuaded or sidestepped or manipulated by somebody else's conditioning.
That's huge. That's huge. Of course, that begs of the question then next, how do we cultivate intuition? How do we consciously become skilled at, first of all, recognizing when we're bumping into our conditioning? And secondly, how do we harness this capacity to leap over our conditioning with great awareness? How do you do that?
Best thing to do it is as a child. Best thing to do it for the society to encourage intuition. Our society used to do that in America and elsewhere. But everywhere, as people gradually accepted the materialist worldview, which, as you know, dominates science, what happens is that the materialism, everything is matter. They don't agree that mind exists as a separate entity. They think mind is a capacity that the brain has. It's all brain's way of doing things. Brain cognizes, not the mind, not consciousness. There is no such thing as consciousness which has any causal efficacy, according to these materialists. This philosophy, of course, I agree with you. You probably will say immediately that nobody understands these things the way you say it anyway. That is true. People don't bother about these things. But what happens when they're raising their children? They don't pay attention to the fact that the child has a lot of originality. Instead, they try to make the child into the socio-culturally accepted way. And this is what the conditioning makes it worse and worse and worse. So these children eventually in school can discover new things by reading, because there are still olden day literature and olden day science which do tell you the truth. But unless you are a quiet person of initiative, some autonomy, you cannot do it. Most children are robbed of their autonomy by the parents. They're so demanding, so controlling, that the children never get to be autonomous, never take responsibility for their own thinking. In other words, the socio-cultural conditioning, plus, of course, the social media, cultural conditioning, information processing, just stops us from processing meaning completely. We pass exams in school just by committing to memory and exaggerating everything. And of course, internet will tell us the obvious meanings anyway, accepted meanings anyway. We don't have to learn anything. If you want just the accepted meaning, look it up in Google. Google will tell you. Google won't tell you that there are subtleties, there are many differences, there are many other opinions. Google just tells you the standard Google writer, whatever he chose, and he chose according to the materialist science.
Right now, I'm actually crying because I'm thinking about my youngest daughter. I have 8 children, and my littlest, who's 12, has managed to, I think, hold on to that essence. And she's constantly telling me, Mommy, the 5th dimension is love, and it's all about feelings, and we have to change the way we feel about things if we're going to change the world. I'm wondering, listening to you and recognizing that she's been raised in a school system that's very oriented towards storytelling as part of the process of learning. And so she really, I think, has a different understanding of archetypes and meaning. But I want to throw this question to you, Dr. Valentina Onosor. How, if you're not a child, if you're a grown-up and you're starting to understand that maybe the meanings you've cultivated are creating divisiveness and limited thinking, and you're not feeling creative, or you know that there's a solution, but you don't know how to discover it, how do you start optimizing the brain as an adult to tap into these higher states of creativity?
The idea of transformation, which is both in when somebody is sick, when you're suffering, when you start asking about this meaning of everything, It can come at any age. And indeed, in the process of development, that's very important to understand. And if we didn't get what we needed in order to be used with what is called expansion of consciousness, the world of intuitions, they don't come from thinking. So you can think as brilliant as you think. It will not take you to intuitions. It can lead to certain extension of activation of the brow chakra maybe, but the intuitions and the archetypes are far from that even. So the expansion of consciousness, it's you, speaking of this, you said about your daughter and love. We can expand our consciousness once we are able to include others and once we can manifest compassion. It's no locality. Once we are able to tap into this space of no locality, we open this space up. Otherwise, like what we talked about, the development. So child development, it is an important factor. We are born in the quantum self and we get bogged down with the negative emotions unless we are very connected with the mother. So I'm sure your daughter was very much connected with you. And this is the most important, especially in the first year. And then the next 2-3 years, they get the chance to develop altruism. And the quantum self is very active and they interact with other adults, including the father. And then you develop this other love, especially girls. And then, of course, heart is this crucial factor in terms of feeling this expansion. Because intuition in the thought level, the expansion is quickly blocked by mental habit of rational thought. But in the heart, especially as a child, you don't immediately cover it by rational thought, which is not fully developed yet. Of course, it's easier for people who grow up in countrysides or having nature around to learn about this kind of feeling of expansion, because if you're not used with that, then maybe it's more difficult to get it. If you're used with the classical music or not. If you're used only with rock music and Metallica, then you will not be able to appreciate the beauty and the sublime of the classical music. And the same way with other higher thinking feelings. It's very important in the process of development to develop what is called navel chakra, to develop autonomy and self-trust, self-respect, self-worth. Because if not, the heart will not be enough in this process of development. If we don't develop it, and it can happen especially for women, I saw that a lot, we need to learn how to work on it. And as a woman, that's the first place to address. Check your belly. Is it contracted? Start working on that. Like simply engage the abdomen in your breathing consciously and bring that energy there together with learning and making a journal. Of course, I'm taking patients and students and everything. When they come towards me, they all have to make this journal and become aware of what they are feeding in the subconscious to see what is there and start working with this kind of emotions also, not suppressing, not over expressing, also to create a certain harmony which is needed. Then is coming this compassion. Compassion means equally with and passionate, being passionate with someone to share a feeling. We speak about empathy, which is a non-local process. If a person overcomes the problems which can appear, if all these are not in place in the natural development, but still you put yourself at work and you go through transformation, which usually is not an easy process, then you will be what we call open. And then we talk about the scale of happiness and how this capacity of expansion can increase indeed. And we have to be aware of these negative emotions. When we have negative emotions, we just want to get rid of them. We have to understand. And in this book, you will see something which was for the first time I understood, that we have these negative emotions inherent. And the first thing we need to do is to overcome the me-centeredness. You see people which are very proud maybe, and people who are having a lack of self-worth. Obviously, that's not the right state there. So the first thing is to overcome the me-centeredness. And also nowadays you have to be very attentive to all this information processing. Also to learn how to deal with the sexual energy, all that. All these things, they lead to narcissism. And once you get a hold on these negative emotions, you eventually control them by developing very wisely and perseverantly, the positive ones. That's our job, to develop the positive ones. Love, compassion, forgiveness, gratitude, all this. It takes work and it is 5 times harder to create those ones and to have them stable. We need to really balance these negative emotions with empowering the positive ones. Brain doesn't have them naturally, except for the motherly love, the altruistic, and a little bit of romantic love, but that's mixed already with attachments and other things. So we need to really develop them. We understand that we are here to develop all these good things there, Yeah, especially if you're in a state of suffering or disease, You may ask yourself until when, or when will this end? It's transformation is something continuous. You have to get used with that and to enjoy what is there. Of course, if you don't see the meaning of your life, you cannot enjoy this continuous process of transformation.
Again, I'm going to break this down because I heard so many beautiful gems in what you were saying. So for us to gain, let's say, autonomy or sovereignty over our mind and what we create and how we exist, the first step is to, if we're adults, hopefully if we're children, we're being raised by parents who can help us hold this piece intact. But if we're adults, the first step is you have to heal the meanings that you have in your life that keep you from seeing your value and keep you from loving yourself. That would be step one, right?
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay. And then step two would be, from that shift in perspective, you start to recognize that you have a unique, and vital role in the world. And that story, we'll use the archetype metaphor, that archetype that you're here to embody has a right place. It's interconnected with everybody else's right place. And so from that place of fully standing in your own value, you become compassionate because you understand that you're part of a whole. And from that compassionate place, meaning you shift your perspective from me to we, from that perspective, then you become more aligned with the unconditioned flow of consciousness through the mind. Would that be a good way of summarizing that?
Yeah, and it's already putting you in that space of non-locality, which opens you towards the expansion of consciousness. And then indeed, you can work with what is called the science of manifestation. Otherwise, it's not working. So if you don't start with something to expand your heart and then work and setting your intent for that period. But then again, it's another trick here. The problem is that we don't grow well children nowadays because we are so busy as parents and we just throw to the poor child a tablet or a computer before the child is developing a certain level of attention and discernment. And if this happens, he's dumbed down. And you have to understand it's a strong relation between attention and choice. Attention is, when we speak of neuroscience of attention, maybe you heard, has got a lot of research already. Attention is best when things are clear. Usually we pay attention to what we have experienced before. There's this kind of conditioning created there. Things that we didn't experience, average things, a person cannot see them. That's why attention is a characteristic of the geniuses, because they pay attention to the unknown. And the average person may not even notice that the quantum leap took place and that he or she was faced with this unknown something. But the genius is looking for it and will become aware. Attention is crucial in discoveries, in insights, the clarity that is built in a person. So just think what's happening, this addiction. There's an addiction process which is happening with internet nowadays and with kids learning this superficial way of having so-called friends on Facebook and not so many masks which are allowed to be created in this way. There's no authenticity encouraging in all that. People who want to transform, they have to, first of all, to learn to pay attention, because the intention will play a huge role in their life. Attention and intention, they go very, very well together. And if people who cannot pay attention, they cannot transform and they cannot bring their objective into practice. You can do it during special moments, maybe in a meditation, but the conditioning may not be enough to go with the past conditioning. We also have to really learn to pay attention. And it's funny because it's so boring when you say to somebody, you have to learn to pay attention. It seems it's so easy, and the mind doesn't like easy things. It's a monkey there. How can a monkey like easy things? It's getting bored, right? So you need something new and new. And that's why, again, Alzheimer nowadays, it's happening. Like 45 years old already is there.
So let's talk for just a second about Alzheimer's. My background is in nursing, and I have always thought my clients that worked with or struggled with Alzheimer's, that there was a certain amount of regret that played into Alzheimer's disease, that oftentimes it was a cosmic forgetting, if you will, of pain. Now, that's a metaphor. Obviously, I don't want to draw physiological conclusions about Alzheimer's, but I'm wondering, I'd like to hear your take on Alzheimer's and what remedies there might be to prevent this disease that is a huge, tragic disease, and the numbers are astonishing.
We have already a theory which we lead Alzheimer even with autoimmune disease. It's very interesting. It's a theory we started to do research on the subject because, as we saw more and more people manifesting it at younger and younger age. You will find more about this in the integrative medicine book, Quantum Integrative Medicine, which is coming up very soon. But the point is that in Alzheimer's disease, the immune system malfunctions and starts attacking its own body cells. That's the general idea. But Alzheimer's disease might happen to people even with the immune system okay. In quantum science, we have a very beautiful explanation about the immune system. Maybe Amit wants to tell you more about this. But another thing, which I would think, it's all this hyperactivity, which is leading, of course, as maybe to the pathological condition of attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And nowadays, what you do, they are giving pills to everybody, treating as if this is something that you can treat with pills, not with a certain training. How's that? And then, of course, this intellectualism, which can lead to depression and other pathology, but among which I would suspect that it's also Alzheimer's. And I would suspect very much this life without meaning and purpose. And there's nothing there. All your memories are gone because you're lacking this kind of thing, memory. And in the past, think how what we have in the past. We had all these wise old people. Now, where you find them? Amit, look at this. I mean, for me, it's so amazing when I see Amit. He's 85 years young. I met him some years ago, but every year, he's really regenerating and rejuvenating, and he's ever curious, and he likes to be challenged in all the understandings. It's a process of continuous growth. It's very interesting to watch what's happening. So there are very few people which I see in this way, unfortunately.
That leads me to one last question, and I think it's sort of a follow-on to the Alzheimer's. We seem to be in an epidemic of anxiety. Talk to me for just a minute about what is anxiety and how does that relate back to the quantum brain?
Let me address this one because this is a very interesting question from quantum science point of view. The anxiety scientists miss the very definition of anxiety. Anxiety is not identical with anxiety of a particular thing. Anxiety about a particular thing, the phobia, for example, the fears, they happen because we had a trauma that produces anxiety. When we re-experience it and we develop a fear of a place, fear of height, fear of spider, all kinds of fear. Those are called phobia, and we can heal them with therapies that have been developed, behavioral therapy, EMDR, eye movement. These are very good therapies. But this is only trauma. This is only part of the story of anxiety. This is not the cause of what makes it anxiety, which is not about a particular object. It's about the subject itself, the one who experiences the object. And this is the non-understanding because in materialist science, there is no such thing as a subject who experiences. The experiencer does not exist. Consciousness does not exist. And that is the problem with general education and everything. And therefore, nobody finds a solution to anxiety. So what is quantum science saying? We are writing a book, Valentina and I, and we have discovered that when you deal with this self, Valentina actually already has mentioned it. I don't know if you have noticed it. She talked about the weak navel chakra. Navel chakra holds the body's affirmative quality. When we have intuitive thought and mind participates in it, body is also active. It gives us a gut feeling that this is right. These feelings are important. When we don't get those gut feelings, then we have a weak navel chakra, we say. We don't have any sense that we have really a self which observes, which experiences things that are coming to us. We don't get that at all. And this is why we never get that sense of affirmation about everything. We have to depend on others. Is this right? What shall I do? You know about this neediness. Oh, what should I do? They cannot make decision. This part of anxiety neurosis cannot make decision. This self at the navel has to be put right. And this is why quantum style anxiety neurosis will work. Valentina already mentioned some of this. Too much details. We won't go into this today, but we have methods by which yoga, pranayama, tai chi, qigong, these are movement of energy, movement of vital energy that you have to do to take raise energy from the base chakra survival into the navel chakra and into the heart. Heart is crucial. As Valentin already said, that expansion of consciousness that comes with heart most easily is crucial for people to experience. And then to transfer that energy into the navel and also develop self-love, self-worth, self-respect, these are not so difficult anymore. And that's when we regain confidence. That's when we don't get anxious in a subjective way anymore. We still can develop a phobia or we can still have a trauma, but we won't get into the problem with basic anxiety, existential anxiety.
Beautiful. I'm going to summarize. I've been making a list while we've been talking. I'm going to summarize some of the really important points that you've been making. And of course, summarizing this with the intention of leaving our listeners with a little bit of an instruction manual or a little bit of a to-do list for how they can regain autonomy and sovereignty over their mind and the power of the brain. So the first thing we have to do is to shift our attention or consciously cultivate attention by removing the things in our environment that are distracting. And I'm going to pull something from previous interviews that I've done with Dr. Goswami. Also consciously connect to what you lovingly and beautifully call higher order archetypes, so that you're looking and consciously cultivating beauty and truth and justice and these kinds of archetypes in your life. That when you reframe and consciously cultivate your attention, you then begin the process of deconditioning and reframing the meanings that you have about yourself and life. That helps you fall in love with yourself, heal your self-esteem. It allows you to shift from a me-based perspective to a we-based perspective, and cultivates then your ability to take leaps over conditioning to find original solutions. And ultimately, I believe, and I suspect you believe this too, find the elegant solutions to the challenges facing humanity today. Does that sound about right?
You did so wonderfully, Karen. That's fantastic.
Okay, thank you. As always, Dr. Onesor, Dr. Goswami, it is always so enlightening and really just mind expanding to talk to you. Your new book, The Quantum Brain, is available on Amazon and any online bookstore outlets. I cannot wait to hear what you're going to do next. The last series of books that you've been writing, each one gets juicier and juicier. So I'm very excited to hear about how you continue to integrate these powerful ideas and help us reframe the narrative around mind, consciousness, body, and well-being. So I thank you both for being here with me today and appreciate you both so very much.
Thank you. It was wonderful being with you.
We are designed to work in collaboration with the flow of life's intelligence working through us. This collaborative relationship is pretty unique in that we have the option to allow life's intelligence to use us to fulfill its biased imperative towards unity, greater complexity, and evolution and coherence, or not. The conditioning of our mind, which begins to happen before we are even born, and holds hundreds of years of ancestral experience in addition to the narratives that emerge by virtue of our own life experiences, often blocks the highest expression of consciousness seeking to express itself through our human story. We are at the precipice of a very interesting revolution in the human condition. We are in the midst of a quantum revolution, one that opens up the possibilities for conscious co-creation and the intentional and deliberate use of the mind in service to life's intelligence expressing through us. We are evolving into conscious collaborators with the cosmos. But we cannot fulfill the full potential of our individual stories and the collective story of humanity if we don't decondition our thinking. The beauty of a mind that understands the role of conditioned thinking is that this understanding gives us the power to cut the shackles of our conditioned ways of thinking. When we understand that we can influence our thinking and control the use of our brain, we dramatically amplify our ability to consciously harness the power of the cosmos and to create greater states of health, well-being, and conscious expansion in our lives. When we understand that our brains are collapsed artifacts of a quantum field of information that is deliberate and intentional from its inception, we realize that we are the manifestation of spirit in bodies. Our mind, body, and spirit are unified and coherent in their functioning, and we are better poised to discover the elegant solutions to the challenges facing humanity today. I'm Karen Curry Parker. Thank you for joining me for Quantum Revolution. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform so you don't miss any of the amazing guests we have in store for you. If you'd like to learn more about how you can connect with your innate wisdom and live a life rooted in well-being, please visit our website, www.quantumalignmentsystem.com.
Thank you for joining us on Quantum Revolution with Karen Curry Parker. We hope you found this conversation inspiring. For more information on how to change your world and to hear more about our guest today, visit quantumrevolutionpodcast.com. Make sure you follow us on your favorite podcasting platform so you don't miss a single episode of Quantum Revolution. We'll see you next time for some more groundbreaking conversations with Karen and her guests. How will you impact your world today?